Betty Cheney. This is my hero story. My mother was the person who influenced my life. She was born in Pulaski County, Kentucky, near Somerset. She walked to school, and it was truly
a long way. She had to cross the railroad tracks to get to the school on the other part of town. Her father died when she was 4 years old. My mother had 3 brothers and 1 sister, Grace, who was the oldest. The 3 boys were younger than Mother. Her mother was always wanting to please people. Her name was Mary Jane Miles. My mother never cared if she pleased anyone. It was a very difficult time. There was no work and Social Security or any type of income for her to count on. So the children went to work as soon as they could, and my grandmother did sewing for people. When my mother was about 16, her mother remarried her neighbor, and I don't believe my mother ever forgave her. His name was R.P. Taylor, and he had a farm just next door, and he had a bunch of boys, about 8 or 9 sons. My mother, Clara, met my father while they were in high school. He lived in Somerset, and his dad had a produce store, things that the farmers brought in, chickens, eggs, and vegetables. My dad's name was George Richardson. They were married when she was 16, and I was born a year later in 1924. My grandmother had a baby about the same time with her new husband, and Mary Alma and I grew up to be like sisters. Neither of my parents graduated from high school. Not many people did in those days. The Depression started right about that time. My father was looking for work as a machinist. We came up to Ohio for a job at Frigidaire outside of Dayton. He loved to take me to look at the trains. They were his passion, especially if there was a new engine. I can remember a new green one that was decorated with flowers that everybody came in to see on a Sunday afternoon. I have a younger brother, Guy, and he contracted polio when he was 4. We moved back to Somerset so my grandparents could help out. We lived right next door to my grandparents, and I stayed with them, but I would go to the window and to try to play and to talk to Guy because I couldn't go inside because he was contagious. Well, my mother was the disciplinarian in our family, and my children say that I was the bad cop, and my husband Carl was the good cop in our marriage. She was a very strong woman and had definite opinions of how things should be. We had to mind, and if we did not, we got a spanking. We never heard a word about not spanking back in those days. I don't think Guy and I got into trouble very often. After my grandfather Richardson died, my dad received a small inheritance. My dad and mother used this money and bought a little grocery store in Danville, Kentucky. It was 1936. My aunt and uncle had a small grocery store in Danville already, and they encouraged my parents to come. Both my mother and father worked in the store. It was a credit business. A lot of people charged their groceries back then, and my mother did the bookkeeping, and my father did the butchering. I was in the 6th grade, and my brother, Guy, was in the 4th grade when we moved and started school in Danville. Before, we had moved countless times, and I went to schools in Carlisle, Ohio, and then a school near Blanchester, and in Somerset, Kentucky. When they bought the store, my father stayed open on Sunday mornings, and it was a 7-day-a-week job, and they would work on Saturday night until about 10 or 10:30. Guy and I were too young to stay by ourselves, so we would lay down on top of the bean bins and fall asleep. The store was on the edge of where the white people lived and the black people lived in town. In the 1950s, my parents opened a brand new grocery store called the Super Key. It was very successful, and eventually Piggly Wiggly bought them out. Another interesting fact about my mother is that she was a wonderful cook. She always made a hot breakfast: bacon, eggs, biscuits, gravy, country ham, the works. I always have a hot breakfast because that is what I grew up having each day. My mother made the best rolls you have ever tasted and the best pies. She would serve you a quarter of a pie. She loved having the family in for dinner. I remember big family dinners with so many people that there needed to have tables set up in the living room for all the children. Neither my mom or dad were church-going people. Dad was a Methodist and Mother was a Baptist. They made sure that my brother and I went to Sunday school every week. That was important to them, that we would go to church. When we moved to Danville, my mother saw to it that we went to Sunday school at the Baptist church. Because I saw my mother as a strong woman, she was not one of those wives who blindly followed their husbands. She was the boss in the family. So I grew up knowing that a woman could have strong opinions and be her own person. And I think that made a huge influence on my whole life. That and her love for her family have been a guiding
Have been
influence.
a
in me.
guiding influence in my life. I'm Betty Cheney. This is my hero story.